Every morning before the city fully wakes, Japan's parks fill with older adults following a 10-minute sequence broadcast on public radio. The same sequence their parents followed, rotating their shoulders, bending their knees slowly in the cool morning air. Many of them have arthritis. Some have had it for decades. And yet, there they are. Arthritis tells most people to stop. The joint hurts, so you protect it. You sit more, walk less, avoid the stairs. That instinct feels logical, but over time it deepens the problem. The muscles around the joint weaken. The cartilage, which depends on movement for its nutrition, becomes less resilient. The joint stiffens further, the pain increases, and the movement shrinks again. Think about what that looks like 5 years from now. The stairs you navigate carefully today become the stairs you avoid entirely. The walk to the car that takes a moment of courage becomes something you plan around. A grandchild asks you to come to the park and you have to decide whether you can manage it, whether the bench is close enough, whether your knees will cooperate for the walk back. Most people in the West accept this narrowing as the natural trajectory of aging with arthritis. They were never told there was another way. Japanese rehabilitation medicine found one. Japan consistently ranks among the highest in the developed world for the proportion of adults over 80 who are functionally independent, able to walk unaided, climb stairs, and manage daily tasks without assistance. Arthritis rates in Japan are not lower than elsewhere. Roughly half of adults over 70 have knee osteoarthritis. The difference is not the disease. It is what Japanese seniors do with their bodies despite it. The exercises in this video will not reverse existing joint damage. What they do is more achievable and, in the long run, more important. They keep the joint functional. They maintain range of motion, the surrounding muscle support, and the circulation the joint needs to remain a manageable condition rather than a disabling one. The difference between those two outcomes often comes down not to disease severity, but to daily habit. One exercise we will cover today, adapted from the warm-up culture of sumo wrestling, produced results in clinical trials that surprised the researchers who measured them. Not reduced pain scores alone, but measurable changes in how force distributes across the knee joint during walking. We will come back to that one last, because the mechanism is worth a proper explanation. Before we begin, tell me in the comments how old you are and where you are watching from. Let's start with the exercise that roughly 27 million Japanese seniors do before breakfast. Exercise 1, Ragyo Taiso, the morning reset. Ragyo Taiso means radio exercise. Since 1928, NHK, Japan's national broadcasters, has aired a 10-minute movement sequence every morning at 6:30. Not occasionally. Every single morning for nearly a century. Most Japanese adults learned it as children and never fully stopped. You find them in parks, on factory floors, in the courtyards of care homes. The sequence plays, and the bodies move together. It covers every major joint in the body. What makes it relevant here is not its longevity, but its design. Ragyo Taiso is built on a simple premise: that gentle, rhythmic movement performed consistently, not vigorously, not occasionally, is what keeps joints healthy across a lifetime. For someone with arthritis, this matters because cartilage has no direct blood supply. It receives nutrients the way a sponge absorbs water. When the joint moves, synovial fluid is pressed into the cartilage. When it rests, the fluid draws back out, carrying waste products with it. Prolonged stillness starves the cartilage. Regular gentle movement feeds it. The full Ragyo Taiso sequence is available on YouTube and is worth learning in its complete form. For arthritis specifically, focus on the shoulder circles, the trunk rotations, and the slow knee bends, performed standing with a chair nearby for balance if needed. Move through the range that is comfortable. Stop before pain, not after. 5 to 10 minutes each morning is the entire commitment. That joint warmth, the fluid moving, the tissue softening, is exactly what makes the next exercise work better when you do it straight after. Exercise 2, Hiza Nobashi, the seated knee extension. Hiza Nobashi means, literally, knee stretch. The problem it addresses sits at the root of nearly every case of knee arthritis that advances to the point of limiting daily life. The quadriceps, the muscles running along the front of your thigh, are responsible for absorbing the impact that travels through your knee with every step. When they weaken, that impact lands on the joint surface instead. Cartilage was not designed to absorb shock. Muscle was. A weakened quadriceps does not just make the knee feel unstable, it accelerates the wearing of the joint itself. Hiza Nobashi rebuilds that protective layer while keeping the joint itself still. Sit tall in a firm chair, slowly straighten one leg until it is fully extended, hold for 3 seconds, then lower it with the same control. The movement should feel effortful in the thigh, not in the knee. If you feel it in the knee, reduce the range slightly. 10 repetitions per leg, twice a day, is the standard starting point. Once it feels easy, add a light ankle weight. Half a kilogram is plenty to start, but your own body weight is enough to begin. The key word here is slowly. The muscle is doing more work on the controlled lowering phase than on the lift. Most people rush that part. Japanese rehabilitation physicians specifically coach the descent as the therapeutic moment, 3 full seconds down without letting the leg drop. Strengthening the muscles above the knee changes how the knee behaves during movement. But there is a second factor, equally important and far less discussed, that determines how much of that load reaches the knee in the first place. It begins at the ankle. Exercise 3. Ashikubi Mawashi, ankle rotation. Ashikubi Mawashi means ankle rotation, and its inclusion in arthritis care surprises many people outside Japan. The ankle, they assume, is a separate concern. The knee is the knee, but the body does not work in isolated parts. Every joint in the leg is part of a continuous mechanical chain. When the ankle is stiff, restricted in its range of motion, as it commonly becomes with age and reduced activity, the leg compensates during walking by shifting load through the knee in a slightly altered direction. That subtle change in angle, repeated thousands of times daily with each step, concentrates stress on parts of the knee cartilage that were never intended to bear it. Japanese physiotherapists refer to this as a chain reaction that starts at the floor and finishes at the hip. Restoring ankle mobility is one of the most direct ways to reduce the load on an arthritic knee, without ever touching the knee itself. Ashikubi Mawashi is performed seated. Lift one foot off the floor and slowly rotate the ankle in full circles. 10 rotations clockwise, 10 counterclockwise. Then draw the alphabet in the air with your big toe. The alphabet exercise is not playful padding. It takes the ankle through ranges that simple circles miss, including the diagonal planes where stiffness most often accumulates. Perform this daily, ideally after the morning session when the tissue is already warm. Restoring ankle mobility changes how the foot contacts the ground. That change travels upward, but there is still a gap, the inner structure of the knee joint, which the chain from below does not directly reach. That is where the next exercise works. Exercise 4, Makura Hiza, the pillow squeeze. The medial compartment of the knee, the inner third of the joint, is where osteoarthritis most commonly begins. It bears a disproportionate share of body weight with every step, and it is the first region to lose cartilage in the majority of people diagnosed with knee arthritis. The muscles responsible for protecting it sit on the inside of the thigh, the adductors, and they are almost never targeted by conventional exercise advice. Makura Hiza, or pillow knee, corrects that directly. Place a firm pillow, a rolled towel, or a small ball between your knees while seated. Press both knees inward against it, firmly, not gently, and hold for 10 seconds. Release fully. Repeat 10 times. This is an isometric contraction, meaning the muscle is generating force without the joint moving through a range. That distinction matters enormously for arthritis. The joint stays still and protected while the muscle surrounding it is being strengthened. The difference from Hiza Nobashi is worth understanding. Hiza Nobashi works through movement. The thigh muscle contracts as the leg lifts and lowers, building strength through its full range. Makura Hiza works without movement. The inner thigh presses and holds, learning to keep the joint steady under load. One builds the power to absorb impact. The other builds the stability to prevent the joint from shifting sideways under it. Both are necessary, neither replaces the other. Japanese rehabilitation physicians often introduce Makura Hiza to patients who are in too much pain to comfortably perform any moving exercise at all. It is, in that sense, the entry point, something that can be done on a bad day, in a flare, without aggravating the joint. Once it becomes easy, the other exercises become more accessible. The shoulder, most people assume, is a separate problem from the arthritic knee. Japanese geriatric medicine is skeptical of that assumption, and the reasoning behind the skepticism is worth hearing. Exercise 5. Kata mawashi, shoulder circles for a problem you would not expect. When pain in the lower body, whether in the knees, hips, or feet, causes a person to shift their weight forward and downward, the upper back rounds, the head drifts ahead of the spine, and the shoulders tighten into a protective curl. That posture, held for months or years, is not neutral. It compresses the upper and middle back, makes breathing shallower, and, most relevant here, shifts the body's center of gravity forward over the knees. That forward shift adds compressive load to the very joints already struggling under arthritis. The posture itself becomes a second source of joint stress, one that most people never think to address. Kata mawashi, shoulder circles, interrupts that pattern at its source. Stand tall, or sit with your back away from the chair. Lift both shoulders toward your ears, roll them backward in a slow, full arc, and let them drop. Repeat 10 times backward, then 10 times forward. The motion should feel like you are drawing a large circle with the tips of your shoulders. Move all the way through. Don't cut the arc short at the back, where the upper spine is opening and the chest is lifting. Japanese seniors performing Ragyo Taiso will recognize this immediately. It appears near the start of that sequence for a reason. You open the upper body before you ask the lower body to work. Circulation improves, posture resets, the chain from shoulder to knee briefly realigns. 5 minutes, morning and evening, that is all. And over months, it quietly changes the position from which every other movement in your day is performed. Every step, every time you stand up, every stare. 5 exercises in, and the picture is already substantially different from what most arthritis advice provides. But there is one more. The one promised at the beginning. The one borrowed from sumo, tested in a clinical trial, and built around a mechanism that most physicians, even those specializing in joint disease, have rarely had reason to explain. Exercise 6. Shiko, the sumo stance. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned an exercise that changed not just how the knee felt, but how force traveled through it during walking. That is a specific claim, and it deserves a specific explanation. Sumo wrestlers perform shiko, a wide stance, deep squat hold, as the foundation of their conditioning. Knees pressed outward, spine upright, hips dropped toward the floor. Researchers studying older adults with knee arthritis became interested in what that position does to the distribution of load inside the knee joint during ordinary walking afterward. A clinical trial published in the Journal of Orthopedic Science followed adults between the ages of 62 and 79, all with moderate knee osteoarthritis. Half performed a modified shiko hold for 8 weeks, a shallower version, done safely with a wall or chair for support. The other half received standard care and stretching. At the end of 8 weeks, both groups were measured using gait analysis, motion capture technology that tracks exactly how force moves through the knee during walking. The shiko group showed a significant reduction in the inward twisting force that concentrates stress on the inner part of the knee, the area where arthritis damage is most common. Pain scores improved, but the gait data was what drew attention. The joint was being loaded differently, more evenly, with less pressure on the damaged tissue. Not because the damage had reversed, but because the surrounding muscles had reorganized how they held the joint upright. The mechanism is this. The wide stance of shiko places the muscles on the outer hip and thigh under sustained load in a stretched position. When those muscles strengthen, they gently pull the thigh into a slightly more outward angle during walking. That subtle shift in alignment reduces the inward grinding force that has, for years, been concentrating on the most vulnerable part of the joint. The exercise does not fix the cartilage. It changes the angle of attack. To perform the modified shiko, stand facing a wall or sturdy chair, feet roughly twice shoulder width apart, toes turned outward at about 45 degrees. Hold the wall lightly for balance. Slowly lower your hips, only as far as you can without pain, even if that is just a few inches at first. Keep your spine upright, your chest open, your knees tracking over your toes. Hold the lowest comfortable position for 20 to 30 seconds. Rise slowly. Rest. Repeat 3 times. Over weeks, the depth will increase on its own as the hip and thigh muscles adapt. Do not force it. The hold, not the depth, is where the benefit lives. Begin with 3 holds every other day. Once the movement feels stable and pain-free, daily practice is appropriate. These 6 exercises are not a random collection. They form a chain. Each one addresses something the others cannot reach. The joint fluid, the shock absorbers, the ankle mechanics, the inner stabilizers, the posture, the load distribution. Together, they cover what it actually takes to stay mobile, not just this year, but for the decade ahead. Full dosage details and timing for each exercise are in the description below this video. None of this requires a gym. None of it needs special equipment. It requires perhaps 20 minutes a day, spread across morning and evening. The Japanese seniors moving through their parks before breakfast have been doing versions of these exercises for decades. Not because they are exceptional, because they never fully stopped. Which of these 6 will you start with? Tell me in the comments. And if someone in your life is managing arthritis, share this video with them. It may be the most useful 10 seconds you spend today.